Douglas Fairbanks running naked through the film sets? Yes, I have to say that in the case of Douglas Fairbanks you could easily run into such a scene. You often hear about actors having quirks, but Douglas would have a lot to say about quirks, that's for sure. But since he can't any more, I'll be the one to surprise you with his life story, and not just any story. You and many other fans have called Douglas Fairbanks the King of Hollywood, but what kind of king would have different mistresses and leave his wives to marry another woman that caught his eye? Don't worry, we will get to this in the video, along with the inner existential crisis that Douglas Fairbanks had in his past, namely his childhood when a man, or an artist for that matter, is at his most vulnerable. Not for nothing did he face deep insecurity throughout his life. There was a reason for the fact that he couldn't even stand the sight of alcohol, and not just any reason. You see, despite all this, who did he become? Not just a king, but the one who liberated actors at the time. But before we dive deep, sign up for our newsletter now. Don't miss a single vintage tale. Link in the description. I've just described the quintessential medieval king. Maybe Fairbanks is a king after all, as his approach is similar to that of one, and he had quite the kingdom too, before he was usurped. This is the kingly tale of King Douglas Fairbanks, first of his name, Hollywood's first royalty. There's one thing you have to understand is that the old days were different. Actors in the eyes of the people were not seen as cheap individuals willing to do anything for money and fame. No, back then the actor or actress represented serious moral and ethical values. This was often the reason why the reputations that formed in the minds of the audience, whether false or their own, were protected at all costs by the studios, and they in turn would have done anything for the box office and the millions of dollars that came in. Douglas Fairbanks bravely broke out of it. But the consequences were there. The previous Hollywood stars were gods. They operated and created the template that the newer stars use. Give it up for these men and women and their contributions. Among those that chiefly contributed to the growth of Hollywood was Douglas Fairbanks. The nude scene I mentioned is absolutely true. He adored the spotlight and the adoration he received. Let's be honest, it's no surprise. This man had some serious talent. Let's get to know him better. Fairbanks was an athlete, and he loved doing his stunts by himself. He was a great believer in his athletic abilities, and he would do anything to maintain it. Rumour had it that when he was involved in a project of building a studio, he wanted to build an underground track where he could run around naked in between takes. Imagine! However, Fairbanks wasn't just the fitness guy who managed to become a star. He had an immense talent to go with his athleticism, and he loved to be flamboyant too. He was a real showman and loved to show off in his films. But he wasn't annoying when he showed off like an average actor would be. He did his thing with style and an apparent glee, which showed he enjoyed doing what he did. He was a little vain, too. The actor took a lot of pride in his body, which manifested in his roles. One thing is certain, when you dig into Fairbanks's roles, keep an eye out, and you might catch something interesting. Each character he portrayed carried a piece of Fairbanks's own struggles from a tough past. It's like he's sending you a secret message that only makes sense if you really know his true self. That's what I'm bringing to you. In The Good Bad Man, the actor got the role of Passing Through, a showy outlaw who was the Western version of Robin Hood. His character stole from adults to give to orphaned kids. According to the film's plot, the outlaw's activities are a result of his own insecurities about his origins. However, it wasn't only Passing Through that had that feeling. Fairbanks himself did too. While the critics loved his performance and hailed the film's originality, they didn't know the actor was acting out the doubt he had about who his father was. According to reports, the mother was twice married before she met Fairbanks's alleged father, and their relationship was scandalous. It had events that reduced the trust between husband and wife, which impacted Fairbanks, who grew up feeling unsure about who his real father was. The good thing is, rather than letting his feelings of insecurity consume him, the actor used them as fuel for acting. And when you see his performance in When the Clouds Roll By, you would almost selfishly be grateful for his dysfunctional past. The film saw the flashy actor move from a Robin Hood-esque character to a superstitious, wealthy young lad whom an evil scientist uses for an experiment. In a usual fashion, the actor rose to the occasion and gave a believable performance of a tortured man. For Robin Hood, yes, the actor became Robin Hood. We suppose this was a long time coming, since he already had experience playing such roles. However, this time the athletic star did something outrageous on the screen at the time. No, I'm not even talking about his stunts. What I mean is that the actor's costume. Now, producers had discarded such costumes for the screen because the audience got bored of them, but on Fairbanks it just looked right, and it was. The man looked superb and not out of place on the set. He, who people wanted to limit as a comic, showed he could be an action-type actor when needed. He certainly needed to show his capacity for action when he became another costumed character in The Mark of Zorro, which, according to most people, is arguably his best role. Becoming Zorro was one of the roles that showed Fairbanks's affinity for costumed and stylish swashbuckler characters. He was the Batman before Batman even made it to the screen. In the film, the man was a symbol of justice, and he fully used his elaborate moves to the audience's delight. But honestly, the man had nerves of steel with the fearless stunt work he did. Just as he thrilled as a swashbuckling hero, he was also great at silver screen villainy. In fact, he was so good at it that some of it spilled into his life. This king sometimes had no regard for the people closest to him, and soon you'd see what I mean. OK, let's clarify this. When I say king, we aren't talking about Fairbanks having a royal background. Heck no, he isn't related to one, at least as far as I know. However, his mother was from a wealthy family until her husband's partners took everything from her husband. John Fairbanks. No, John wasn't Douglas's dad. OK, I can sense you are getting confused. Let's take it back from the top. Ella Adelaide Marsh was the daughter of a wealthy Southern Roman Catholic family who knew nothing of life, as her sheltered existence wouldn't let her. Her parents thought they were protecting her, and props to them, they did an outstanding job. Actually, they did too good a job of it. Just as harm didn't touch her, reality didn't too. So when her husband, John Fairbanks, a wealthy New Orleans sugar mill and plantation owner, whom she had a child with, died, Ella was lost. Her husband's business partners saw an opportunity and went for it. They cleaned the woman's purse of everything. Now enter Charles Ullman. Charles was John's friend and lawyer. He rose in defence of his friend's wife, but despite his best efforts he couldn't do anything to remedy the situation. Ella moved on, her double grief and child in tow. She was sad, lonely, and needed company. Then she met the courtly Georgian Edward Wilcox. The two of them married, but being courtly didn't mean Edward would always be a gentleman. The man drank more than a fish. Ella had a child with him, but found out she couldn't cope with his drinking. She hired Charles, and he helped her to get a divorce. Then Ella began to think, why not Charles? He had always been there for her. The two of them slowly began to fall for each other, and Ella decided to move to Denver with Charles when he asked, as the man had mining interests there. When the couple got to Denver in 1881, they married in 1882 and had two sons, Robert and Douglas Ullman. Yes, the same Douglas. Charles was his father, and he wasn't initially Douglas Fairbanks. What happened? Charles re-established his law practice and also maintained his mining interests, but something happened. Well, two things, depending on the report you want to believe. A report said that Charles left the family when Douglas was 5, and that he was a raging alcoholic. This report went further to say that it was this event that made Douglas hate alcohol. Well, that was one vice out of the vice bag for Douglas, but he did have a passion for smoking, and you know what they say about smokers. Another report claimed that the man abandoned the family when Douglas was 5 years old, because Ella was cheating heavily on him. Whatever happened, one thing was certain. The woman changed Douglas's surname from Ullman to Fairbanks and scarred the actor, who grew up questioning his origins. But that's not the only thing that defines Douglas. He was much more than that. And there's no need to feel sorry for him. His unique charm captivated everyone, especially the women who adored him, and believe me, the women did not covet him out of pity. Fairbanks was a naughty man. He loved acting, true, but it didn't look like he liked school as much. The actor began to act at an early age and worked in amateur theatres in Denver. He performed in summer stock at the Elich Theatre and in other productions that Margaret Feely sponsored. Margaret had an acting school for young people in Denver at the time, so Fairbanks could pursue his passion. Unfortunately, his passion didn't extend to school, as Denver East High School expelled him for cutting the strings in the school piano. Cheeky man. But it didn't matter. What need did he have for school? He must have wondered. At 11 he was already sensational, making money for his family and getting offers. Maybe these offers got to his head and made him not to take schools seriously. Do you want to know a secret? Fairbanks silently regretted this. He always lied that he went to Colorado School of Mines and Harvard University. He aimed to make it to Broadway, but he wasn't ready for New York yet. He toured with Ward for 2 seasons. The first year he only acted. In the second year he acted and served as the assistant stage manager. When he was 17, Douglas left for New York and landed his first Broadway role in 19, acting in the Her Lord and Master. However, the actor still hadn't gotten his big score yet, as he worked as a clerk in a Wall Street office and a hardware store when he didn't have work. Fortune smiled on Fairbanks as he got a role in a popular production, A Gentleman from Mississippi, which ran for a year. Then he fell in love, and we all know when love hits, everything changes. In 1907 he married Anna Beth Sully in Watch Hill, Indiana. Anna was the daughter of wealthy industrialist Daniel J. Sully, and within 2 years of their marriage they had a son. Fairbanks worked for his wife's dad, his eyes still on the stage, but it wasn't the stage that called. In 1914, Triangle Film Corporation offered Fairbanks his first film role, and the man jumped at the opportunity. The role had him working with the brilliant filmmaker D.W. Griffith in Hollywood. The two were not big fans of each other. Fairbanks had a flair for athleticism that Griffith could just not comprehend. So after they worked on The Lamb, it looked like the two of them would be done. However, the audience loved him, and eventually so did Griffith, as the pair would cooperate for more films. Not many people could do handsprings, swing from ropes and even leap from rooftops, and smile while doing them on camera at the time. That was Douglas Fairbanks' essence. From being the agile hero in his first film, the ones that followed were not as swashbuckling as he might have liked. He transitioned to a comic for his earliest films, and he became a staple in romantic comedies, which Anita Loos and John Emerson usually wrote and directed. After Douglas debuted in Hollywood, he met Mary Pickford, who the audience also loved. The attraction between them was electric, and they soon began an affair, but couldn't be together, not in the way they wanted, as they were married. However, they were content to sneak behind people's back, but that wouldn't be for long. As the First World War began, the sneaky couple and Charlie Chaplin began selling Liberty bonds. Pickford and Fairbanks took more than a few liberties with each other on the side, but as the two would eventually find out, it wasn't enough. They considered divorcing their partners, but feared what the public would say. Still, they didn't want to be caught, as they were afraid of the scandal that would arise. But did they stop? No. The two of them continued their affair. At the time, Pickford was the bigger star, as she and Chaplin were the highest earners. Fairbanks was the third biggest paid, and it took a lot of sense and smartness for him to achieve this in 3 years. Just as the man's popularity grew, he wrote a book that did well in the market. No surprise there. All was well and good until the studios struck. They didn't like that the actors were earning high, and found a way to reduce their earnings by monopolizing distribution and exhibition. They would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for the king. He showed that as king he wasn't to be controlled, especially not by stuffy studio executives. So he, Pickford, Chaplin and D.W. Griffith formed United Artists in 1919. Their creation allowed these stars to escape studio control, as they made their films and had their own studio, distributorships and artistic control over their films, and the profits generated. Can you imagine how revolutionary that was in those days? It seems like the Fairbanks were the greatest revolutionaries, and when you think about it, that's kind of true. Douglas Fairbanks and his private studio opened up and liberated actors from the exploitative grip of the studios. In 1918, Fairbanks damned the audience. Well, it wasn't as if he had a choice. It was the only step left to take for him. So after selling the bonds, the actor's wife had enough of his antics. In her anger and grief at the betrayal of her husband, she took to the news to reveal that the man was cheating. It was scandalous. The hero of heroes, the Boy Scout, had been soiled, and people began to guess who he had the affair with as his wife revealed it was with a colleague. The guesses were unanimous. All eyes turned to Mary Pickford, who fear gripped as she wondered about the aftermath. Anna divorced Fairbanks, but he wasn't bothered. He only wanted to marry Pickford, but she was still married to her husband. The king would have none of it. He gave Pickford a choice, him or her husband. She chose. The actress went to a small town in Nevada to divorce her husband, and her actions caused a controversy. Legislators in Nevada debated on divorce and objected to it. It even led to a big case. This was a terrible sign for the couple, who still had to face the public. Then it was time to face the fans, but their fears were nothing. The fans were excited about the two marrying in 1920. Everybody's hero marrying America's sweetheart. People could get behind that. And when we say people, we mean even those outside America. Audiences in Europe treated the couple like they were royalty. After the honeymoon, the two returned to America, where they lived in the Pickfair estate, a fitting palace for Hollywood's royalty. The large estate was allegedly Fairbanks' gift to his new wife, and according to the rumours, the two have warmed the house many times during their different pre-marriage escapades. Fairbanks's career continued to grow, but he didn't become selfish. He remained dedicated to freeing actors and actresses from the studios and making life easier for them. So he, Pickford, Chaplin and other stars helped to create the Motion Picture Fund to assist actors and actresses who could not work or meet their bills. Fairbanks helped create the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1927 and served as the first president, but all wasn't well for his marriage. He had younger women wrapped around his finger, but Pickford felt old, and the media never let her forget she was losing her looks. The two of them were declining. Talkies had become more popular, and the two silent screen legends felt out of place. Talkies were new at the time, and as a result things were a bit mechanical, severely affecting Fairbanks's physical acting style. The couple tried to stage a comeback with the film The Taming of the Shrew, and it was a bust. It failed, and in 1933 the king abdicated from his kingdom and lost it to Clark Gable. Unfortunately, Fairbanks and his fair bride didn't only lose their careers, they lost their marriage too. With more time on his hands, the actor went on a womanizing spree, which ended in Pickford divorcing him. From not wanting to spend time away from her, Fairbanks simply didn't care about her, going off times without number and leaving her alone. The dethroned king soon remarried and had a wedding with Lady Sylvia Ashley, his mistress, and they travelled the world together. But the travel was a mask for the actor's pain. Want to find out what that is? Follow my next story on Mary Pickford. Eventually consequences knocked on Fairbanks's door. All those times he smoked crept up and stole his health away. The man had a heart attack. Unfortunately, the heart attack took his life. The king was dead, but his work lives on to this day. He would never be forgotten as the man who liberated actors. As I mentioned, being an actor at that time was not easy. Not only did you have to perform in extreme situations, but you were also often entangled in quite unpleasant circumstances. While researching Merle Oberon, I stumbled upon a shocking incident in her life. I immediately felt the need to share it with you. So I delved deeper into Oberon's life and created this video. Why did Laurence Olivier spit on Merle Oberon? Please watch it. It will leave you speechless.